Right guys, I love music theory and I love music theory applied to the guitar, and I think that if you've watched any other video on my channel, you probably already know that, because I like to explain the music theory behind any chord progression or any song that I mention on this channel. When I do so, I often mention various subjects, various music theory subjects, and because I don't know what's your level of preparation on music theory, for each of my viewers that could mean something different sometimes. It isn't always easy to figure out what's the best vocabulary and language to keep in terms of music theory to allow the vast majority of you to follow my lessons on the channel. So today I would like to cover 10 subjects that you can see as 10 steps, to measure where you are at with music theory and understand how to progress further with music theory on guitar. Now, a little disclaimer, this doesn't want to be an exhaustive list of all of the music theory subjects. Music theory can be really wide and really wild sometimes, but we will try to keep it to the 10 subjects that I would suggest anyone should actually master in order to really deeply understand the music theory of the music that you love to play. Right, so in my opinion, the very first subject should be mastering the intervals, understanding the fretboard, and possibly learning the major and the minor scales, okay? So you should be able to understand what it means if we say that between the notes C and E there is a major third, or between the note C and E flat there is a minor third. Really basic knowledge of the intervals like we are mentioning right now, and possibly understand that a major scale is made by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the minor scale is made by 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, back to 1. And once you understand this, make sure that you are able to locate the names of the notes on the fretboard while you play. So while you play scales, and more importantly, while you play chords. Then the second step should be covering chords. So making sure that you guys understand all of the triads, major, minor, diminished, augmented, and that you are able to understand the inversions, and then you go to seventh chords. So major seventh, minor 7, dominant 7, half diminished, diminished 7th, and then if you like also minor major 7 and major 7 sharp 5. Now once we understand intervals and chords, I would focus, and this is the step number 3, into harmonizations of the major and minor scales. In other words, understanding the keys and the chord numbers when you are both in major and minor keys. This makes sure that anytime you play a song, you always know what's the key of that song, and anytime you want to look at a chord progression or maybe make your own chord progressions, you know which chords you have available in each key, and you're also able to analyze them with chord numbers so that you recognize the most common chord progressions later on. Speaking of that, if you guys want to learn more about R&B and Neo Soul acoustic guitar with all of the music theory needed to really master this style, make sure to check out my R&B and Neo Soul course on Skillshare, which you can check out for an entire month for free by clicking the link in the description below and getting 1 month of free trial of Skillshare. Then the step number 4 should be understanding time signatures so that you recognize when a song is in 4/4 and when a song is, for example, in 6/8, and also the key occidental, so the alterations that you guys find in each key, sharps and flats, the sequence of sharps and flats, and why not the circle of fifths. Step number 5 is going to be one of my favorite, which is chord extensions. So understanding when we say 9, 11 and 13 refer to a chord, so that you can take a chord like D major 7 and you can extend it to the 9th, making it a D major 9, okay? Or you can take a G minor or an A minor and you can extend them, for example, as minor 11 chords, which are nothing but minor 7th chords extended to the 11th, so that you use the 4th degree, 1 octave higher, effectively giving you the 11th. There is an entire lesson about that on this channel. You will find it linked in the description below. In fact, there is already a lesson about most of these steps, music theory subjects on the channel already. So although, as you know, I don't mention it too often, if you want to learn more about music theory on guitar, make sure to subscribe to this channel, because more and more lessons about music theory subjects applied to the guitar will come very, very soon. Now, the step number 6 is another of my favorite, and it's chord substitutions. And when I say chord substitutions, guys, I refer to 4 specific chord substitutions, okay? The first one is the tritone substitution, which is when you have a dominant 7 chord, which you then replace with another dominant 7th chord, a tritone apart, okay? The second one is when we introduce the secondary dominant. So when you decide that you want to go to a chord, passing through the 5 of that chord, creating a dominant 7th chord, adding a dominant 7 chord to the progression which wasn't there, which isn't the primary dominant of the key, and it only acts as the tension to go to the next chord, creating a 5-1. The third chord substitution is very similar. It's what we call a secondary diminished 7th chord, which is when instead of using the secondary dominant, you actually use a diminished 7th chord which generates from that secondary dominant, and it's nothing but that secondary dominant made altered, made dominant 7 flat 9 and played rootless. The last chord substitution is what we call diatonic substitution, and is when you learn about chord families and you start replacing chords that belong to a certain chord family with other chords that belong to the same family. For example, you can replace a C major 7 with an E minor 7, and in fact that will be just like playing a C major 9 rootless. Now guys, if you would like to get an even more detailed plan for your music theory journey, make sure to head to my Patreon page, where I will put all of these 10 steps into details, giving you even more instructions so that you can progress further with your knowledge of music theory on guitar. Right, step number 7 is modal scales, and when I refer to modal scales, I would like to suggest to learn the modal scales from a parallel point of view as opposed to a relative point of view. Let me show you this with an example. If we are playing the C major scale, to me it's kind of like pointless learning the modes, moving for example to the Dorian mode, which is the second mode of the major scale. I learn it as a D Dorian mode, like this. Because at the end of the day, they contain the same notes. So if instead of learning the D Dorian scale, as a second step after learning the C major scale, you learn the C Dorian scale, you'll be able to see which degrees actually change, because you're now using parallel modal scales, so modal scales that share the same root. Now, step number 8 is gonna be modal interchange and modulations. Modal interchange is when you guys borrow a chord from a parallel key. So if you are in the key of C major, you're playing a C major chord progression, you may borrow, for example, a chord from the C minor key, and that will be a modal interchange from the parallel minor. Modulations instead is when you guys switch to another key, so you are not just borrowing a single chord, but you're actually moving the chord progression that you're playing or another chord progression in a different key from the original key that you were in. And then step number 9 is finally going to be chord progressions, making sure that you guys can recognize when we play a 2, 5, 1, or when we play a turnaround 1, 6, 2, 5, and so on and so forth. Other styles will have their own unique chord progressions, like for example a 4 minor, 5 minor, 1 minor if you're into R&B, and many more. So making sure that you guys can play the most common chord progressions of your favorite styles. And then little disclaimer before the step number 10. This is not going to be something that if you don't know, you're gonna struggle with in your music journey. But if you want to be as complete as possible, if you want to really master music theory on guitar, I would also suggest to learn the harmonic minor and melodic minor scales, which doesn't only mean learning the shapes on the fretboard, but it actually means learning the intervals and, more importantly, the harmonizations of these two scales, which will give you 14 chords, one chord for each of the 7 degrees generated from these two scales, and that also means another 14 modal scales. So modal scales, guys, are not just the 7 modes generated from the major scale, but also another 7 modes coming from the harmonic minor and 7 modes coming from the melodic minor. Now, I would really love to hear from you in the comments how many of these steps you feel confident with, and if you think that I missed any really important music theory subjects, please let me know that in the comments and let's keep the discussion going.